Okay, I've really splashed out on the equipment for today's watercolour video. I bought myself a set of 10 brushes for a grand total of £1. Now that's just over $1 in American money. I'm going to be using 5 of these fantastic quality brushes, and I'm going to be adapting them into brushes I'll be able to use within my watercolour paintings. Hi, I'm Paul Hopkinson, a professional watercolour artist and an online art tutor, and also, at times, a bit of a cheapskate too. I really don't see the sense in spending masses of money on really expensive equipment when it's not always necessary. So, today, we're going to be making a masking fluid applicator brush, a replicator brush, a lifting off brush, a stippling brush, and a fine liner. They'll all cost me just about 50p and a bit of my time. And what's even better, I'll have 5 of these amazing brushes left to create 5 more watercolour tools in the future. So watch out for a follow-up video at some point. Okay, now the first brush I'm going to show you how to make is a masking fluid applicator. I know they look funny, don't they? Look at the shapes of these. What's the point in all that? I'll show you. So from something like this here, well, even though these are brand spanking new, look at the state of that. Look, I don't know. I'm going to make use of them. They cost me a whole £1, don't you know? They really did. But the idea is that when you create something like this, you can use this, like I've just been testing down here, look, to create all sorts of effects like ripples in water. So imagine reserving the whites of the paper when you're painting, it's probably a seascape or something like that. And then when you paint over the top of that, it could create like little ripples. Or this one, for example, which is all funny shape as you can see, I can load that one up with masking fluid. And that can be tapped and stippled and rolled and stabbed and all sorts of ideas to create texture. So you can imagine texture on foliage or anything like that as well. And it's all texture on a beach, you know, for sand and stones and pebbles. And all I've simply done, instead of washing that brush, I've just kept reusing it. Let the masking fluid set on the brush and then use it again and again and again and again. What I've done with this one, as it's still damp, I've actually got hold of the brush and then stamped it on some card like that, just to flatten it out to create this lovely like a mushroom shape on the end of it. Really, really useful. So I'm going to show you how to make one of them first of all. And all it simply is, as I say, a very expensive brush like that one there. Yeah, okay. I'll load that up with masking fluid first of all, okay. And if I use some of the card from the back of that packaging, I can then use that to start to stipple with it, to create some funny shapes. And it depends on what you want to create really. So just by tapping it and pressing it into the card, eventually you'll start to create different shapes all the time. Well, there you go. That could even be coming down from a fir tree, couldn't it? Each one will be unique in its own way. So it's well worth doing this with some cheap old brushes or brushes that you're about to throw into the bin and create some masking fluid applicators. So there you go. That's how to quickly ruin a brush and actually make use of an old one ready for the bin. Now that's all dry, and I've been testing some other ideas out at the same time whilst that's been drying. So I'm going to get a clean finger, so a bit of kitchen roll, nice and clean, remember, and then you can remove all of the masking fluid to reveal the white of the paper and all them little marks that were made by using our special kind of homemade created brushes. Look at that. Wait. Gotta try and get it all off though, that's the thing, haven't you? There you go. So look at this, these are the ripples I did, if you remember, for like a seascape. And the good thing about that is that if you think actually it's probably a little bit too much, you can come back in with a clean, tiny brush, the size of a 00 brush, and kind of touch them up a little bit and just change them a little bit more and just alter the way they look. Tint them in with a little bit of colour, whatever you want to do. But it's a good way of creating reflections and different kind of textured effects within a watercolour painting. There you go. Now one of the brushes I use on more or less a daily basis because I paint fur and feathers is this one here. And I call this a replicator brush. Yes, I know it looks rough. But then again, if you remember, I'm just using old brushes like this. Well, say new brushes, but not very good ones. That's all that is. And this is one that was destined for the bin. So I thought, let's see if we can kind of make something with it. And all it simply does, we get some colour, a little bit of colour paint. I've been practicing that down there for you in kind of anticipation to show you what I'm doing today. Take some paint off first of all, so it's not too overloaded. And then you can use that to create lots and lots of fine lines. Can you imagine blue hair? Blue fur? No. But you can imagine the idea with this is that you can create lots and lots of layers very quickly by using something like this. Alright, see how quick that was? Just to create that one small area there. So you can use it for fur, feathers, and also grass as well. Imagine blades of grass. Okay, in blue, of course. So, how do we create one of those? So get an old brush or one of these which I bought for £1. So very, very cheap, I know. And that's a size 2, but it doesn't really matter what size you want. You could even do this with a large brush if you want to, which is a size 12. Okay, so all I do, I get a pair of pliers, I know, get ready for this, and I crimp it, probably about 1/4 inch, if that, no more than that maybe, along the metal ferrule. And I'll squeeze, no, I'll squeeze it, I am. Look how bendy these are, not very good, are they? And then I'll squeeze again towards the top, like so. Really good hard squeeze. And then I'll start to pull that apart. Hold on to the metal ferrule when you do this though. Start to pull it apart. This will crack the metal ferrule. It always does on the end when you do this. And it'll start to split. Like that. Keep flattening it. Keep twisting it out like that. Look at the way the hairs are starting to span out. Yes, you can do this with a fan brush as well. I know there'll be people saying, Paul, I can do that with a fan brush. But this is a way of making use of very cheap old brushes or very cheap brushes that you buy from, say, these discount shops and do something with them. I'm going to keep going with this just a little bit longer. Now you can see the way that metal ferrule is just broken apart there. That's exactly what I've done with this one here. Look at the state of that, okay? So that's what I'm looking for, that kind of effect, as daft as it sounds. Okay. Then you can get a knife and you can very lightly just take some of those hairs away. So just kind of thin it down a little bit. If you don't do it over your finger, I'm very lightly doing this, as you can see here. Look, I'm still taking hairs off though. Do it on a piece of board though. Alright, health and safety first please everybody. Okay, so take some of those hairs off, like so. There you go. We'll try that first of all. Get that quick rinse out a minute. Give it a dry. And let's get a little bit of red paint. There we go. This is just a small amount of alizarin crimson. And take again a little bit of that off. Look at that. Lovely. Brilliant. The bristles to begin with. And then you can start to see how well it works. And remember, you can adjust this as you go along. If you find, hang on Paul, that's a little bit too wide. It really is. Let's crimp it back again. So get either side of it, give it a little bit of a squeeze. So now you've got them 3 prongs closer together. Let's get a little bit of blue. Well, it's actually going to be purple now because it's still got the red on there. And then you can turn it around, move it around and start to create all these fine lines, all these fine marks with what I call a replicator brush. So a very quick way of putting the first initial layers on for feathers and for fur, and also another way of creating grass blades, anything like that. So we get a little bit of green, for example. Oop, take some paint off. Remember, don't overload it though. And then create a little bit of grass there, look, straight away. Look how quick that was. And that's what I call a replicator brush. Another brush I like to use is one for lifting off paint, but this is for lifting off paint in small areas. So something like, for example, where should we go? Let's use that big one first of all. Big one? I know, it's not that big, is it? So I'm going to dampen that down a little bit. Just been testing that out there, and I can use that lot just to very lightly, just go over the paper just a few times to remove some of the paint. And obviously you can make these even smaller. So I've got one here, which is very dinky, very tiny. Look at the size of that. Very, very small. And you can see I've made that to a chiseled edge. So I've actually stepped it down, like a little step, made a little chisel on the edge of that. So then that will move very small amounts of paint. Let's do a little bit there actually. Like that. So you can get really, really fine. Obviously, the less water you have on it, the finer the line will be. And also, the less pressure you apply. So it's really useful to have one of these within your painting kit. I use it on and off every now and then with my paintings that I do. Okay, so how do you make one? Now, it's very simple. Make sure you've got a brush which has got a reasonably kind of stiff bristle. Now the ones I've bought are not that stiff unfortunately, but I can give it a try and we'll see how one comes out. So let's say for example this one here. This is a size 6, there you go. So I don't know, probably have it a bit smaller than that normally, but it'll do anyway. Pair of pliers, and let's just ruin it straight away, shall we? I'm coming down probably about 4 or 5 millimeters, something like that, not very far down. And I'm going to crush that metal ferrule once again. I know. What do you do with things like this? Okay, but I'm not going to twist it out or anything like that. I just want to get this nice and flat. So just do it that way around as well, like so. And then I'm going to get a pair of scissors, well there you go, and then trim that down. Now it depends how long you want these to be. I want these fairly short. So I'm going to go probably to about there. Something like that. Fancy a haircut? There you go. And that's a little bit of an angle, but that doesn't matter. Don't mind that at all. Get rid of any surplus. And then we can try that straight away and see what that one's like. But I do think that's going to be a little bit too wide. And any little stray hairs that you can see, just take off a little bit. I'll trim them down with a knife. And you can see straight away this is starting to work. Just by very lightly touching the paper. But it's not fine enough, is it? It's not really fine line. Not like we got with this one here. So what do we do? If I get some of the packaging from my brushes, and I can get a knife, like this one here, and then scrape off some of the hairs. Try not to damage your watercolour paper at the same time though. Just to thin it out a little bit. So I'm just going to thin this out. Back with you in a minute. Oh, and do it both sides by the way, okay? Okay, that should just about do. And what you can do as well, get a pair of nail clippers and you can trim off just some of those fine hairs that come down the sides. So if I just get that out of the way so you can see this. So just catch the edge of that and then trim. Okay, and the same again on the edges there. Just to fine tune it, just to trim it back. Any loose hairs that you can see really. And this is all from a cheap brush, don't forget. This has cost me something like 15 pence or something like that, so it's not expensive. I'll give that a quick try and see how it goes. Just try a little bit down there. Take some water off that brush ball, a little bit too much water on there. A little bit more there, so I'm going to go very fine now, very light with the brush, barely touching. And the same again, barely touching. And that feels stiff enough as well on there. So now you can see I'm getting the finer, thinner marks compared to the way it was before. And these lines are more kind of sharp and distinctive. It's not blurry edged or anything like that. And that's because I've thinned this out. And I can still thin this out even more. So you can see it on there sideways. It's a little bit wide, isn't it? So we can carry on and thin that down a little bit more with a pair of nail clippers. And that's a way that you can use an old brush or very cheap brush for lifting off small amounts of paint. Now let's get another one of our cheap brushes. Yeah, no, it's not very good, is it? I want to create something which you can use for stippling. So imagine again foliage, trees, bushes, anything like that. But how are we going to do that with this one? Now this time around I'm not going to crush it with a pair of pliers. I'm just going to trim it down. So let's get my pair of scissors, my trusted scissors. I'm going to trim off, look at that, that's terrible. I'm going to trim off probably about half the length of that. See the difference there, look? So let's trim that off first of all. Yeah, one quick, very quick haircut. And there we are, already we got a texture brush, something like that there, look. So how does that work? So first of all, what we need to do is get some paint. So just move my palette around there. Get a little bit of brown in there. So a little bit of burnt umber. Bit of that colour in there as well. And I'm going to stipple it and tap it like so, and then take some of that paint off on some kitchen roll. Now I've got a pad of kitchen roll by the side of me as well. Then all we need to do then is start to stipple. So you tap in very lightly. You've taken most of the paint off, remember. Very lightly to create small, tiny marks. And the more paint that you take off, the finer the marks will be. Look how fine these are going on there and I can barely see them, but look how fine that is. That's lovely, isn't it? So imagine if you worked on this in various layers. to create the texture that you're looking for. So if I get a little bit of green, so some yellow there, a little bit of blue, okay, something like that there. I'm going to tap most of this off camera. And again, I can create small bushes just to begin with. And obviously then you will do the same again and intermingle that with a little bit of browny green and other colours that you want to use within your kind of bushes and textures within a tree. Alright, let's get a little bit of brown and do the same with that colour over the top to create extra colour and texture and depth within this effect. But you can imagine how useful something as simple as this would be to create lots and lots of texture. Remember, take most of that paint off before you go onto your paper though. And the more paint you take off, as I say, the finer the marks will be. So let's say, for example, I get a little bit of colour. We painted just a very basic, rough looking tree, just for a bit of fun really, more than anything. Now we know trees grow from the ground upwards, so that's how you want to paint them. So they grow from the ground and then up. And nice shaky hand here and there to create some very kind of odd looking branches here and there. Okay. Put a few more limbs on there first of all. Have a few just kind of crossing over different areas as well. And I think I'll just get a little more colour down one side of that. Let's get some blue, that'll do. Just to darken one side a little bit in places. That's all I'm after. There you go. And we'll get our little replicator brush which we just made. And we can create just a few little lines around there. Let's get some more brown off there. There you go, that's better. Just a suggestion of grass growing down the side there. Some brown grass, why not, eh? And go for some green grass. Just down the bottom of the tree. Just for a bit of fun, obviously. There you go, how's about that? And that's just using one we just made. And then we can get our stippling brush, which is this one if you remember. Let's get some green first of all, shall we? And we can use that to very lightly stipple a suggestion of foliage on the tree. And obviously the more that you add, I need some more colour in there, don't I? The more that you add, let's get some yellow in there, and a little bit of blue. There you go. We'll try that, shall we? A little bit of green, there we go. The more paint you add on your brush, obviously the deeper and darker the colour will be, the more intense the colour will be. But this is just an example of what you can do very, very quickly indeed, obviously. You want to spend more time than this on it to create a kind of impression really of foliage within a tree just by using the brushes that we just made. I know, good fun, isn't it? Really is good fun. I've got one more brush to show you once I've finished painting this tree. But before I do that, could I ask you to do one small thing for me? Well, it's actually 4 things, but we won't tell anyone if you don't, okay? So could I ask you to click on the thumbs up button if you're enjoying this video, leave me a comment down below if you found this video useful, share it with your arty friends, and of course subscribe to my channel for when I make that video with the rest of my brushes. I do really appreciate all these interactions and they give me a bit of a boost to produce more content for you. Anyway, I think we should get to that 5th brush and see what we can make of that, don't you? Okay, and then we can get our lifting off brush we've just created as well. And we can use that just to take off a little bit of the light side of the tree. Lift just a small amount of paint off, create a little bit of a highlight on one side. Look at that. Yay! Love it, absolutely love it. Just a little bit more further up as well in places. So that's what you can do by using a homemade lifting off brush like that one there. So we've already gone through a variety of techniques just using our old brushes like this there, look, just a very cheap brushes. So from the masking fluid, hang on, we could make that into a moustache, couldn't we? Or some funny hairstyle. And also we've got the texture brush, we've got the small lifting off brush, and of course our replicator brush, which we did for grass blades, that kind of idea, and fur and feathers, of course. So what would happen if I want to paint a very fine line without having to kind of crush the metal ferrule or something like that? So here's another of my cheap brushes there, look, okay. So I want to trim this one down to make it a little bit thinner, really, and to get more of a point on it. So when we use our size 00 for a lot of the paintings, this is great, really is good. But the problem with these is that they can be a little bit on the short side. So that means you can't put enough paint on that, can you? So to trim this one down, all I need to do is do the same thing again as before. A pair of scissors or a pair of nail clippers and start to trim the sides. Go one side, do the other one. Do a point, okay? Think you're trying to sharpen a steak. The ones you're going to put in grounds, of course. To make it even finer to the point. And keep going until you get a nice fine point. So I'm going to keep going on this one a minute. And you want to end up with very few hairs left on the brush. I know. Then when you get so far, start to bring the scissors down the side and trim. Just by skimming it like that and trim. See that? So down the side and trim. Down the side and trim. Down the side and trim. And keep doing that all the way around. Again, you can use a pair of nail clippers instead. And every now and then, just give it a wet and see what it creates. So now you can see I've actually got quite a long tapered point there. Look at that already. Just by kind of just trimming it down to create more of a belly, which is what that'll be, to hold more paint, and then give me a longer tapered line. Let's give that a quick try, shall we? Just get rid of these hairs a minute. And we'll try to see if that one works. So I'm going to start down there. And start, look how fine that is. Start to pull up and then apply a little bit more pressure now to create a longer line. That is so fine. So I'm going to load the brush, I'm going to roll it in the paint as I do so and then pull away. And then again, try loading that up and then give it another go. And then apply a little bit more pressure. There you go. We'll give it a wiggle as you go along. And even by doing finer marks like so. And that is the fifth brush which we've made today on creating long, tapered, fine lines. There you go. So now what I can do, and go back to our little tree painting, and I can use this one now to create just a darker side on here on the tree, and even finer lines going away to create even more detail on this tree in the background. Just little tiny lines hooking away, and because as I said it's got quite a large belly on this one, it will hold more paint. And you can see the effect that you get already. So it goes to show, even with a cheap brush like this one here, worth about 15 pence or something like that, you can create some very fine details just basically by playing with the brush and give it a nice pointy shape. So there you are, that's 5 different brushes we've made today by working with different techniques and different effects within watercolour painting. So go and get yourself a very cheap £1 set of brushes and see what kind of brushes you can make for different texture and effects within your watercolour paintings. I'll see you in my next video to the right, which is all about creating some fine lines with your watercolour brushes. I'll see you there.